So it's not for kids.
Where do I want to start? Just like the cold open like we usually do?
Cole's here, so it's a new person to potentially talk about the Minecraft movie starring Jack Black and Jason Momoa. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it. Yeah, I heard it felt like it was written by Chat GPT. GPT rather.
Yeah, it's an interesting film. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Oh my goodness. Are you sure you're not doing it a great kindness?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. But not because I was watching high art or anything.
Sure. I mean, I think the thing about the Mario movie is that I find it so boring.
Yes.
Like
yes.
The modern Mario movie, I just felt like it just felt so tested and controlled and just utterly without life. So that even when it was funny, I'm like, this is so sad. I felt like they just motion blur. You know, I mean, it's the thing about AI generated art, which is that, like, I get that people have the wrong number of fingers or whatever, but to me, the more upsetting part is that it feels like motion blur creativity. That they just kind of like
are lifeless.
Yeah, they're like frame filling. Like, we put two things that you like, and we just kind of guessed what was in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
The Mario movie was so insipid, and I remember walking out of the movie being like, I would have loved it if it were way worse.
Right. I love that you're bringing this up because that's Kenny really thought I would hate the Minecraft movie because I hated the Super Mario Brothers movie. I despise that film. And I saw the Minecraft movie and it was bad from like a technical standpoint in many ways. It just, you can see characters flailing around in front of a green screen and it's not convincing at all. It should have just been an animated movie, but I was entertained and like sort of like it brought joy to me in a way that the Mario movie did not at all.
Because it was bad and it was like self-aware bad, whereas like Mario's trying to be good. Like
you said, it's insipid, boring, mean-spirited a lot of the time. Yeah. I really hated it.
That's what I call princessing.
Yeah.
I'm just glad that I'm not going to have to like talk too much today. You know, I was feeling a little under the weather, but it sounds like the two of you are really commiserating about the Mario movie, and this is going to be the next hour.
There are two sets of footprints in the sand, and it's where we argued about the Mario movie and carried you.
Yes.
Because like I didn't particularly like the Mario movie either, but like the number of times I've heard from Tom complaints about it, and the first thing we do when we get on the call with you, Cole, is you're like, I hate the Mario movie, and Tom is just like, a fellow soul.
Another hater. It really bothers me because Kenny made it sound like, oh yeah, you just kind of have to turn your brain off and then you can have a good time. And I think I genuinely tried to like lobotomize myself and watch the movie, and it still filled me with rage. So,
but also, like, isn't that a sad thing to do? I mean, I love children's media. My wife and I like studied it. We, you know, even before we had kids, we'd always like go to new kids movies and talk about them. And sometimes like we were in a really passionate debate about a Pixar movie that we hated. That was otherwise quite liked. And someone was like, well, they made it for kids. And I'm like, yeah, but adults made it. Like, if kids had made it for kids, then obviously nothing I'm saying makes any sense. But like this should demonstrate like real craft, and it just bothers me.
Do you almost hold it to like a higher?
Children's is a domain where the highest highs are sublime. Mm-hmm. It is unbelievable some of the work that is happening in children's media, kind of across the board. But the lowest lows are so horrible. That you would be better staring at a wall. You would learn more. Yeah. Just like having just a little alone time.
You ever have those children's books that are like adaptations of Disney movies, but they're like completely phoned in?
Yes. That was an entry-level job once, right? I mean, just like...
Right. Oh, yeah.
I think that kids' media can be good, should be held to a higher standard. But I will tell you that like that higher standard is not flipping Inside Out 2. Because what bothers me so much about like the contemporary Pixar movie is that they're really being directed to like people in their 30s who grew up with Pixar. And they just make no sense as like stories that you would for a general audience. I mean, the worst example of that is the flipping movie Soul, which I can recognize Soul as like a good movie. It's fine. But I will tell you that no child has ever earnestly engaged with that movie. because it's about like, if you're a mid-career jazz teacher, like, how are you evaluating your career at this moment? Like, should you have done something else? It's like my eighth grader's really into that. Or,
You don't think kids can relate to that?
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry, my 8-year-old. I've got a fifth grader and a third grader and a kindergartner.
Okay, real quick. This is like throwing a bone at Taylor. Just what do you think about the Spider-Man across?
No, we don't know. We don't have time.
Movies? No, Miles Morales movies. One sentence thought.
Is this for me? Can I do it? I think the first one is exceptionally good, and I think the second one is very bad.
Whoa. Okay.
I think the second one is I feel like I'm running a tech demo for my graphics card. It is visually stunning. It is like absolutely unbelievable as like a piece of animation, but I don't think it works as a coherent story at all. And I think which is sad because I think the first movie is incredible, like top tier.
My daughter was watching the second one on the plane while I was like trying to sleep. And it's the first time that I've ever not been able to sleep on a plane because the flashing lights were like bothering me from the screen next to me. It could have been a perfectly great movie, but I don't know. There's just so much motion and so much like saturation to the screen that I had to like get my SO's pillow and like cover my face.
I think that the first movie does everything the second movie does in a more economical way, just from a storytelling standpoint.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, for one thing, it actually finishes. It's not a cliffhanger, right? Yeah.
I haven't watched either Spider-Verse movie. I'm too busy watching good movies like the Mario movie. Welcome to Shelf Stable, a podcast celebrating board games that have stood the test of time. I'm your host, Kenny Katayama.
And I'm the other host, Tom Bowers. That's right. We don't just talk about movies on this podcast. We also talk about board games. And today, our featured topic is organizing your board game collection. How do you do it? Why should you do it? Why do you care so much about doing it? But before we get into that, we should talk about some of the things we've played. And before we even get into that, Kenny, maybe we should introduce our guest.
Cole Wehrle, who are you?
Hello.
Who do you think you are?
Hello to both of you. I'm so happy to be on this podcast, which has like one of my favorite premises of board game podcasts because I mostly play older games and am a huge advocate of them. So I'm Cole Wehrle. I'm the creative director at Leader Games and the designer of a whole bunch of games, from Root to Pax Pamir. I also run a little historical board gaming company with my dear brother Drew.
Thanks, Cole. We're going to try something a little bit different. I don't know if you're familiar with Nardwuar, but you're going to get the Nardwuar treatment here. So here we go. You ready?
Fire away.
Are you excited? Space collapsing inventions. When you're approaching like wide-ranging topics such as the East India Company, frontier states, or sexuality in Georgian England, there's this concept of these space collapsing inventions that you've spoken about in the past, where you approach these space collapsing inventions in a way to produce like a singular coherent portrait of these otherwise hopelessly complex periods. Do you want to elaborate on what you mean by that term?
Sure. The map is not the territory, right? So like when we sit around a table and look at a map of something, we're not looking at the actual thing. And as soon as you realize that, you can start editing that map in ways to even collapse it further. The game is just a tool to generate a certain kind of experience. And so questions of fidelity tend to be really, they can lead you to the wrong way. I mean, that is an insanely conceptual answer to a question, but that's kind of what it is. So for example, the British East India Company was mostly run by committees, of which there were, tens, if not hundreds of these committees. But I collapsed it into like a ribbon of bureaucratic jobs, which is a simplification of a much more complicated structure. That's space collapsing, even if it doesn't seem like it's collapsing space.
It's the realization that every map is just the treachery of images.
I was just reading this book about these map makers, and there was this amazing like digression about imagining flight. And the person was saying, like, if you could be at a bird's eye, you can see the whole territory with like high fidelity, but you then can't see height because you're just looking from straight down. And when you're sitting straight down, you can see height, but you can't see like the two-dimensional space of the territory. And so you're always losing something whenever you change perspective.
That's a fascinating way to approach it. Yeah, I hadn't thought of like you're always losing some kind of dimensionality or like some feature that you would otherwise have observing it from a different approach. All right, I got a little bit more of an obscure one here.
Good.
So I pasted a picture in the notes here. Patrick Jagoda, Gaming the Medical Humanities.
Oh man, this is a real old school thing. I love it.
Yeah, we did some research.
You're Cole Wehrle. We have to know.
I love this. This is very good. This is a poster I made. When I was a graduate student, I was working for this thing called the Digital Writing and Research Lab. And as part of it, they gave me access to like the Adobe, what now it's called the Creative Suite or whatever. But it was just all of the Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign. And so I taught myself how to use them mostly by doing board game redraws for games that I wanted to be reprinted. And then because I learned graphic design eventually, they just kind of slowly made me do all of the posters for departmental events. And I had a summer gig, not a summer gig, it was like a full year gig with this thing called TILTS, which is the Texas Institute for Literary and Textual Studies. And I did a whole like sequence of themed posters on health, medicine, and the humanities, which was the theme for the year. And as part of that, we invited this guy, Patrick Jagoda, to come in, who is a somewhat big name in game studies. And it was probably my first interaction with academic games was hosting or helping to host this event. So you can see some very early graphic design work. I was actually learning. I remember making this because it was one of the first posters that I made in Illustrator. Before that, I just worked in Photoshop like an idiot. Okay. But I was learning how Illustrator worked.
Is there anything you took away from this that basically gave you a head start on doing graphic design for gaming? Like things that are common mistakes for new board game designers or anybody in the board gaming sphere?
I spent the first couple years doing this and I was just learning how the programs worked. And then the biggest thing that I wish I would have done earlier is I finally went to the library and checked out some graphic design textbooks and just learned like the theory of like, here's how visual hierarchy works. Here's some like basic fundamentals about the grid system, etc. And those books were so much more useful than all those dang like Lynda tutorials I did on learning how to use like paragraph styling or whatever. And so get to the theory earlier, work with your paper and a pencil because that's the more important stuff.
Makes sense. RPG version of John Company.
So there is a person in the historical game space named NB, non-breaking space, or NB to his friends, I suppose. And he is one of the most interesting designers I have ever chatted with. His first game, Cross Bronx, comes out, I think, this year or next year. So he's been working on, he has a lot of designs in the pipeline. So he's one of those people that I think folks are going to know in a couple years, but not yet. He wrote to my brother and I and said that he had designed a role-playing game based on John Company that he wanted to run for us as a live play at Gen Con. And he would do all the work and all we had to do was show up. And I love role-playing games, but they also make me nervous because I find them like very intimate. Like the idea of playing a role-playing game like on camera, I'd probably lose sleep over that thought. I was very hesitant, but I thought, NB, if he's working on something, I kind of want to be part of it. And so I showed up, and it was during the ARC's release, and I was totally tired, and I looked at my brother with these pleading eyes, like, please, can you lie and find a way to get me out of this thing that I signed up to 6 months ago? And Drew said, let me think about that, and then went and brought me back a cup of tea and said, no, like, this is a special thing. Let's see what it is. What we did essentially...
Good job, Drew.
Yeah, he's a good egg. What we did was basically we played a game of John Company, but we had to give all of our player pieces names and birthdays and relationships to each other. And then when the player pieces would interact in the game space, NB would pause the game and say, you just fired that person. Can you write them a letter explaining why you fired them? Or like, the company needs to recruit people in London. Like, let's write a newspaper notice. What he did, it was like playing a live journaling game. And there was an audience. There were people around us watching us play this game. And then NB assembled all of that documentation into like a museum exhibit, as if we were generating like an archive of historical information that then could be curated.
It's fascinating. Yeah.
And it was so wonderful. It was amazing. And in fact, we're going to do it again this Gen Con.
It reminds me of like those like solo journaling RPGs. oftentimes like you have like an action that you can resolve based on a certain amount of mechanics, but then they ask you like why you resolve that, and they ask you to like enter, like I'm thinking of like 1,000-Year-Old Vampire.
Yeah.
Like,
I felt like I was playing a multiplayer journaling RPG.
That's very cool. Why isn't that a thing? Multiplayer journaling, because I feel like the opportunity is there.
Trademark it right now.
Well, there were some things about it that didn't work as well as other parts. Like, it was obviously the first attempt, and we have since talked to NB, and we have some things we're going to work on this summer for the Gen Con event.
The other thing it makes me think of is Pandemic Legacy. This is like really, really mild spoilers, but like you can create relationship stickers later in the game between yourselves and other characters, and you start with like naming your character and stuff. So some of that stuff is there, but it's, maybe not as interesting as it would be in John Company, which makes me wonder though about like John Company Legacy Edition. Would you ever do something like that?
I've built 2 campaign games, and they took so much work that I can't imagine. I can't imagine doing it. However, the idea of John Company as like a mega game, I am super compelled by. And I ran a game of John Company at SD HistCon in San Diego, where we had 4 people per team, and we ran like a 20-player John Company game, and it almost like really worked. And so it is something that it's something that I'm thinking about, and we might try to fold it into what the RPG is doing. Because I do think there are ways to like package the RPG where you say, this is how to do it as like a 1-player solo mode live journaling game. This is the like multiplayer game, and then this is the mega game version. Mm-hmm. And they can use some of the same frameworks.
We have what I think is a funny one.
Show me a funny one.
This is a picture from the first edition of the Pax Porfiriana rulebook.
How could I forget this picture? Drew has a joke, so I'll describe it. This is on the bottom of page 27 of the Porfiriana rulebook, where there's a little caption that is anchored by Phil Eklund in a maybe not photoshopped but actual sombrero that he's wearing. It's hard to know. And it says in the caption that future games in the series are going to use similar pieces and rules, so that basically if you have an idea, you should email me or my son, and we'll talk about making it into a game. My brother jokes darkly that we should put this in all of our rule books with me in different silly period appropriate or inappropriate hats, and I haven't let him do it yet. Phil is a real interesting character in the board game space. I'm plenty critical of Phil, but one thing that I always try to mention is that he's one of my favorite collaborators to work on games with, because he's just always been very open and very transparent as a collaborator. I think in other contexts that's less the case, and it also, I don't know if it's changed as he's gotten a little older, but I started working with Phil because I wrote him an email saying that I had done a graphical redraw of one of his games, and he really liked it and asked if he could buy it from me. And then that led to me helping him on playtesting, and I worked very closely on the game Greenland. It was sort of my first real experience as a playtester and kind of junior dev was on Greenland. And then he was the one who prompted me to start designing games because he liked my work on Greenland, and I submitted a very early draft for PAX Renaissance that did not become actual PAX Renaissance. There's a long story there. After that, he said hey, you should put a game together and try to figure something out, and that led to the first version of Premiere.
I'm curious about the early version of PAX Renaissance. I guess, was there a prompt, or did you separately?
No, I just went for it. So basically, I had played Phil's Lords games. So the other thing about the PAX games is the PAX games are essentially the Lords games card game version. Mm-hmm. So PAX Renaissance is Lords of the Renaissance : the card game. That's really what the PAX title meant kind of originally to Phil and to Matt. The Lords games were these very old school maximalist monster games that took, 10 to 20 hours to play, or maybe 6 to 20. You play them over several days. That just giant map, lots of pieces, mixtures of economic simulation, political simulation, and war game, kind of all folded into one game. And I loved these games. I had played Lords of the Renaissance, I played Lords of the Spanish Main, and Lords of the Sierra Madre. these were games that like meant a lot to me, and I had actually like suffered through them. They never were that, like, as a design, they were always like closer to a role-playing game. Like, you would sit down, you didn't care who won. You were going to immerse yourself in this like huge sandbox. When Pax Porfiriana came out, I think I was one of the first people who ordered it because I had played Lords of the Sierra Madre, the game it was based on, and I was like, oh, Phil is making a card game version of Lords of the Sierra Madre. That's so exciting. When I encountered Porfiriana, I encountered it with the explicit frame of like, oh, he's finally going to do it. In fact, if you read my BGG comment that I wrote about Porfiriana, it is entirely about how impressed I am with it as a card game version of the board game, because it was a comment written in like 2013 or something originally.
Was there like a conceptual whiplash when you finally open up the rule book, or you like played your first game where you're like, oh, this is going to be done in an hour?
Oh, I mean, I knew it was fast, but it is amazing how he collapsed this 10-hour game into a 1-hour game, and it seemed like nothing, like it wasn't like things were cut, it was like things were compressed.
Right.
I was really impressed with the degree to which he managed to keep the kind of high resolution historicity of the larger project. So after I played Porfiriana, that Thanksgiving, I had like a kind of week off of school and we weren't traveling, and I got in my head that I wanted to build Pax Renaissance. Like, I wanted to do the same thing for Lords of the Renaissance that he had done for Lords of the Sierra Madre. And so I built a draft of Pax Renaissance, and then I sent it to Phil, and Phil said, oh, this is cool, I don't think it works, but let me put you on the email chain. I was then on this little email chain with him and Matt and a couple other people, and they literally copy pasted all of my rules into their shared rules document and then edited out like 90%. And in fact, for a long time at the start of the Pax Renaissance rules, there was this Ferdinand Brodel quote from the Wheels of Commerce that was at the head of my rules. That the only thing they kept out of my design was like that quote, like the epigraph. They worked on it for a long time, and then actually they got into trouble. They couldn't figure out how to do Renaissance, so the project completely stalled out. So they got stuck on Renaissance. I helped on Greenland, Neanderthal happened around that time, and then I did Pamir, and Matt and Phil both helped on Pamir a little bit. And at the end of Pamir, I remember Matt telling me like, hey, there are a bunch of ideas in Pamir that I think will help us fix Pax Renaissance. And he asked me if he could use them. I said, well, of course, I hardly get a choice in that. Like, it's just an idea. I can't own an idea. Mm-hmm. But they're very kind about it. And then things like the semi-closed economy, the like way the market payments work, the use of a map, as well as the tableaus, and then the religious victory conditioner, like those are all elements that were like pretty consciously borrowed from Pamir, and that helped allow Pax Renaissance to happen. So like weirdly, Pax Renaissance is both the like father of Pamir and the child of Pamir at the same time, because they were all kind of being made at the same time.
That makes sense. This is kind of a tangent within a tangent. You mentioned kind of the not having like the rights to an idea or something like that, and this kind of came up recently. We talked about import export.
Oh yeah,
how,
sure.
Like a lot of conversation around it when it was being first released was how it was a spiritual successor to Glory to Rome. Mm-hmm. But then you look, and in the rule book, there isn't any reference to Glory to Rome. Whereas like a game like La Granja, which is like pretty different from Glory to Rome, still credits Carl Chudik and says that was a big inspiration. For me, it always kind of like rubbed me the wrong way. I'm like, I don't think there's like a moral obligation to say, hey, this design that I made, import export, it's definitely thanks to a lot of the works of Carl Chudik, but at the same time I feel like it should have been there. I don't know.
I don't think there's necessarily an ethical obligation to credit, but I do think there's an intellectual one. I think ideas are owed to like the context that we all like swim in. It's impossible to ever do a full genealogical accounting of a particular idea or thought. However, games are connected with one another, and I think this is a reason why I am very passionate about including a section in my rule books that talk about design history.
Yeah.
Because I write a lot about the design process while I'm doing it, but I also know that's like incomprehensible. It's like 40,000 words where I'm like really, wading through all the thoughts that lead to a design. But I think in the published game, the game that's going to sit in someone's closet and be discovered in 50 years or something, I want to be able to turn to the back of the rule book and read a paragraph that says, we started working on this game in 2010. We've been playing these sorts of games. Here's how long the game took. Now it's done. And that's just like my inner academic, my inner librarian, because I just think I'm trying to make the work of telling the story of how these games was made easier for people in the future. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why, they wouldn't credit, because import-export especially just kind of is Glory to Rome.
Yeah, that was kind of our take too.
I mean, it's and I get the powers are a little different. There's some subtle things, but it is more like Glory to Rome than Carl Chudik's other Glory to Rome successors are like Glory to Rome.
Right. It seems like intellectually dishonest by omission, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, designer notes. I think we need more designer notes in general. I feel like they're associated with like consims or like war games, but they're always fascinating. I mean, anytime you got something coming up on BGG, it's like, why isn't this in the rule book?
Yeah, no, it is my one little. So at Leader Games, we usually do dedications, but not like design histories in the rule book. And I wish I could tell you it was for a better reason than just like page count. If it doesn't lay out into the spread nicely, then we just won't put anything there. At Leader Games, I'm trying to preserve the integrity of the studio as a black box, because I could go through ARCs and tell so for example, I'll use ARCs as an example. When we finished ARCs, we do a debrief process, and as part of the debrief process, I wrote a pretty detailed design history that described the 3 or so years that led to the creation of the project and how everything went, who contributed to what areas. And we have that document internally, but as a brand, as a company, as a studio, all that's important is that Leader Games as a group of people made ARCs, and that the people who are in charge of it, the people who contributed to the design, are properly accredited. If anyone, I'll use Patrick as an example, Patrick offered the original outline for Root, and so he has a concept credit in the Root rulebook, original concept by Patrick Leader. So we're very careful about line by line accreditation, but that narrative stuff is something that we're happy to talk about, but we don't really include it because these games are messy and ultra collaborative, and it would generate more confusion, I think, if it were, if we just had it out. And it's the kind of thing that maybe we'll publish someday in another format.
All right, I got one more for you. I think we have time for one more. This is a what I can only assume is a knockoff copy of Root.
Oh yeah, it's called the Great Woodland Battle or something. This is a very weird knockoff. Of
this
Root.
is Kyle Farron art, right?
Yeah, it's exact. Kyle Farron's his shadow career as a mobile game developer. So this is a weird knockoff. It's done by a workshop in China where they actually redo the entire game so that they don't use a single asset that was in the original game. And I will say that this is a controversial object within the Leader Games studio. When it first came out, Patrick was very mad, actually cartoon mad about this. I think Kyle felt pretty hurt and upset by it. I kind of love it because it is it's so absurd. And to me, it shows a real, I'll call it a cross-cultural currency or something. I went to a talk in graduate school about weird Jane Austen editions. And it just talked about basically editions like this, Jane Austen editions where they try to make it seem more sexy than it actually is, or more horrifying than it actually is. And they have these very weird, more pulpy, all these weird cover treatments of Jane Austen. Mm-hmm. I am sure she would be very upset about all those covers if she had ever saw them or had the context to evaluate them. But as just someone who's interested in cultural transmission, I think it's kind of awesome.
I feel like there's a lot more swords present on this box.
Correct. They got the sword ratio all wrong.
Yeah, it really makes it seem like these guys are going to be at war, which does not really carry into how the game typically plays out. I feel like. Yeah.
Especially the Woodland Alliance. I think the theming's a little wrong on the Woodland Alliance there.
Yeah, I think it's great.
It's one thing to do like a duplicate, because there are also copies of Root just completely photocopied. At what point does a game become different? If we go back to the example of import export, I'm not talking like in a general sense, but like maybe like you personally, when do you consider a design to be inspired by versus adjacent to?
Oh yeah, I don't know. That's
like a ship of Theseus here.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, it's funny because it's not something that you can really measure. I think about Age of Steam versus Steam. There is a really critical difference between Age of Steam and Steam. It's small, but it's critical. It has to do with how cubes are added to the board. I don't know how familiar either of you are with Age of Steam, but in Age of Steam, there is this like randomizer that determines where new deliveries spawn. Mm-hmm. And then in Steam, instead of using a randomizer, there's like a little menu. And whenever you place a new city on the board, it kind of comes with deliveries associated with it. And it's a very, very small change. But Age of Steam is like 5 times better than Steam. And it's because of that one thing. Because it has to do with how the game treats its strategic horizon. And so even though that rule is a very subtle adjustment, it really does like dramatically change the character of the game. And I'm sure, I mean, I haven't played Import Export since it came out, but I'm sure I've played a lot of it. I played a fair bit of it. And I played a fair bit of Glory to Rome. And I'm sure if you would have asked me that question in like 2012 or 2010 or whenever that game was around, I would have had like a detailed response of why I thought both those games were different. But with the flattening of time and getting a little bit of distance, I look at both of them and I'm like, well, these are kind of the same. They're kind of the same game. I'm sort of an intellectual property like radical because I fundamentally think that IP is pretty destructive to the creative process. I wish we lived in a world where people could only own intellectual property for like 10 years.
I'm like nodding my head vigorously, like
yeah, and then I just want it fully free. This is why all my historical games we put in the Creative Commons once they're released. In fact, that's what I was doing with the Molly House. This morning I was working on the Molly House print and plays, and that is our way of releasing the game. I mean, these are print resolution files. It's our way of releasing the game into the Creative Commons. Now we do that because in the case of the historical games, we use a lot of public domain art. A lot. And we use a lot of public domain reference images and books. And so it's our way of saying, like, look, this was built using the material of the public domain. It should stay in the public domain. And I think the world is better when the public domain is as robust as possible. Now, at the same time, I recognize that the ownership of an idea is the way that, like, I feed my family. Right. And so these things are like in like really true tension, but to me there's just a little bit of a difference. Like to me the best and most sustainable version of the tabletop industry is a version where fans support directly the kinds of projects they want to see in the world and the kinds of companies that they care about.
Yeah.
Period. Agree. Right. And then, this is not a world where publishers just spout out like a dozen new games a year, hoping one of them is going to like catch fire. This is a world where people know who's making their games and they are happy to pay for them because they understand that the money they spend allows games to be made. Now, Root, look, Root's done super well and it will probably keep doing well for the next several years. But if I'm getting like a big check for my work on Root in 30 years, at an intellectual level, like I'm pretty bummed out by that. Because it was a piece of work I did a long time ago. Right. And the fact that I can own it at all seems strange. Like, shouldn't the people making money for Root be the people who are actually working on Root at that time? And so it's this very funny thing, and all these, like, I don't even have a pure position about it because I do think it's important. It's so important to do like proper accreditation, right? So like I don't want anyone putting their name on Root because that isn't intellectually honest.
I'm really grateful that you have that approach. I think it's impressive, but I also recognize that not everyone is at that same headspace. Also, like other folks are like, they're just approaching it from a different angle. There's a lot of fear to like, what if this is the only thing that I'll ever make that's great? Like,
yep.
So I totally understand why people get into that headspace of like, well, I have this baby that I worked really hard on. Like, I should maintain the rights to it.
But it's this weird cycle.
Like I see both sides.
Yeah. But there's a cycle of fear around it that you will see if you talk to young designers, or if you pay attention to like the pro spiel, like Reddit's, like the different online communities where people are making games, where someone will be like, I have an idea. I am scared to communicate it to people because I don't want someone else to steal it. And if you follow that thread far enough, you get to this pretty lonely place where someone thinks, I had an idea that I think is worth some money, and I want to make sure no one else can have the money that I think my brain just generated. And what I want to tell them is like, are you interested in making money or making games, my guy? Because if you care about making games, then of course the money matters. I mean, I'm not like I'm not coming at this from like even an anti-capitalist angle or anything. Like I am interested in helping to make jobs for as many people as possible to pursue this like amazing vocation of making games. I want to have all those people employed. I want them to have good health insurance. I want them to be able to buy houses. I want them to be able to send their kids to college. And in order to do that, like, we have to charge a certain amount for the games, and we have to be careful about how we design our crowdfunding campaigns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we're in the business fundamentally of making games. That is just a little different from someone thinking like, I've got a brilliant idea. Can everybody start handing me money now? How can I protect this idea? Ideas are just so cheap. I mean, this is the other thing I tell people all the time. Like, it's all execution. The execution is the only thing that someone working in this career, in this path, I'm like, the execution is all that really matters.
In music, around like 2007, there was a big debate about like Napster, as well as like Radiohead had come out with In Rainbows free, basically pay what you want. It took a while to get there, but I feel like that like 10 years later, like the 2017, 2018 period, because we had, I think it was Secret Hitler. Mm-hmm. Secret Hitler was one of the big ones. And then immediately afterwards, you had announced PAX Premiere and the fact that it was going to be Creative Commons and print and play as well. And that was kind of like revolutionary. That to me, the Secret Hitler PAX Premiere period definitely was like granted, those weren't the first games to have print and play components, but it was the first time you were seeing like a really high production game come out with a completely free version. And it was almost like, you can get this for free, so if you can try it out, or even just if you can't afford it, you still have a way to play the game. But if you want the really nice version of it, or you want the nice components, now you have a reason to go and purchase this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's not just, I'm not able to play it at all, so now I need to go buy it. And I think that was pretty revolutionary. I think it affected a lot of the board game industry after the fact. I wish it would affect it more. I wish that was the standard for most productions, which it most definitely isn't. But it's something I'd like to see continue affecting things. Yeah.
So there is there is like almost like a little paradox at work, which I'll try to sketch out fully, which is PAX Premiere. If you want to play PAX Premiere, you need a printer and a little bit of time, and you can build yourself a copy. And there's a print and play. So essentially, the game is free. On the other hand, if you want to buy a copy of PAX Premiere, it costs $75. It's basically never going to be for sale. It's never going to have a discounted price. And Drew and I are aggressive about not selling it to deep discounters. So one of the things that really matters to me are price controls. Like Root is a game that's pretty old. You can get Root for like $40 now if you're looking.
I saw someone sell it for $8 at our last game swap.
Ooh, see, there you go.
New in shrink.
That's incredible. But for a game that old, we have been like very careful about its price stability. We do not flood the market. We do not print too many copies. Root costs $60. You go to the store, Root costs $60. When we run a new crowdfunding campaign, we do not discount the price of Root. It costs $60.
Yep.
And we do this because it's our way of communicating. This is the value of what we made, of what it costs to run the studio. And my biggest pet peeve, and I certainly am not, I'm a sinner here too, but my biggest pet peeve is when I have friends who are very excited about certain Steam games coming out, but then they'll say, I'm just going to wait for the winter sale. And I want to say,
do that.
I know, but never again. So shame on you, because if that is a little studio, if that's a little studio that you care about, you should find the most expensive way to buy that game.
Wow. Okay.
Like you should wait till it is not on sale on purpose, because they are getting so much more money. And I would say, look, I mean, if you buy on a Steam winter sale, if you buy 10 games for like $3 each versus buying one game for $30, that is the difference between potentially transforming one company's lives and having no impact on 10 companies.
I guess I can buy Animal Well.
Yeah, sorry,
Animal Well's on sale.
Wait till after the sale. Wait till after the sale.
Steam is one thing, because as far as I understand, Steam is like pretty fair with their with the amount that they cut from the designers. Like the designer gets like 90-something% of it. That's not always the case though.
For sure.
And I feel like it can be kind of tricky to determine like when paying more for something is actually going to get kicked back to the creative.
Well, I mean, look, this is where like I commit this all the time. So I think Steam broadly is pretty fair, and I think GOG is pretty fair. But I have a GOG account with my like brothers, and we share the DRM free games all the time. And at a certain point, I was like, oh, this is wrong. Like I really like these cool indie games. Like I should be buying my own copies of them just because I want to support them. I mean, I adore digital games, but that marketplace seems so treacherous to me, because the value of what you're doing is completely fleeting, right? You're like, you spend 10 years making a game and it's like $2.99. And I'm like, oh God. Just because it's not a physical object, right? So,
right.
With tabletop, I have to go through all this work to build an object. But then that allows me to like communicate value. And when I'm selling games and I'm working at a convention, I love handing the box to the person I'm talking to and saying like, here's the game. Because I want them to feel how heavy it is, because that weight is communicating the like years of work that it took to make the game.
Oh, absolutely. We've all been there. I love this game called Furnace.
Oh yeah, I know Furnace, sure.
Furnace is like obscenely light for some reason. I don't know what they did, but it feels like it's made of carbon fiber or something.
Yes.
And I can't help but feel like it's like less of a game, even though I really enjoy it, because the game almost like flies in the sky when you grab it. Like it's kind of like
too
bizarre.
easy to pick up.
Furnace is a great example, because there was a way that they could have built Furnace as like a $10 card game. And there was a way they could have built it as like a $60 like clickety clackety like all wood cards.
It's in this weird space in between, yeah.
Well, and also I think that there's like a sweet spot, because I was at my local game shop and someone had dropped off in the used section a copy of ISS Vanguard with painted pieces, 3D insert. And it wasn't even that expensive for all the stuff you were getting. And I picked it up and I was like, oh, this is a headache. This is going to take like, months for me to complete.
Yeah, we call that the Everdell big box effect in our
exactly. Like there is a point where it gets too heavy. This is why I really like the bookcase style framework, because I want to be able to I should be able to hold a game in one hand. And there are I have exceptions to this rule, but like broadly, if I'm working on a game, especially in the $60 range, or a game I'm selling at a convention, I want to be able to hold it in one hand.
So you can take their money with the other.
Yes, yeah. You got it. Look, I got to feed my babies.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Well, Cole, that was our new segment called "We Spend Most of Our Time Talking About Random Facts That We Collected."
I love it. Those are good. I've been online for a long time, so it's pretty easy to find weird things that I worked on and abandoned. And I mean, my BGG account has been around since 2003, so you can find a lot of high school Cole like arguing in the Twilight Imperium forums or whatever.
Very nice.
No. We've talked about Root a couple of times. It made me think about the current ongoing Geek Madness tournament. I don't know if you've been following it.
Oh,
I have been following it a little bit.
Yeah, so Root, it's looking like it's going to move into the finals here. So yeah, Root versus Twilight Imperium. Do you hope to win?
I do hope to win to beat TI. I think Root's a better game than TI. I'll say it.
Oh snap!
Yeah, sorry.
You heard it
I'll go even farther. I think Root is far from my best game.
Okay.
There we go.
Yes. I have a lot of
mogging Twilight Imperium.
Well, I have a lot of affection for Twilight Imperium. I have played a lot of TI, like a ton. I have played probably 30 plus games of the second edition and twice that of the third, and then maybe like 10 games of the fourth edition. And yeah, I have a lot of love for it, but it is also a big trash fire of a game.
A beautiful mess.
It is a beautiful mess. It's the kind of, I mean, the thing is, I want to live in a world with more games like TI and not less, so I'll always cheer it on.
Yeah, I was going to say, imagine you're kind of torn looking at these finals a little bit, but it seems like
no. Let's give Root a shot.
Let's get Root in there. Yeah, it'll be the first time it's won, which is kind of wild. I mean, first time a Cole Wehrle game has won. I think
I'll take it. I was sad to see Root beat Arcs, but I'll cheer it on. I will say, I mean, the thing I like about Root is especially when you use like advanced draft and you're playing with all the weird factions. You just like Root will do some real weird things. Like you'll deal out some factions, start playing the game. And you're like, oh, what is this like bizarro Root scenario we've just created? Mm-hmm. And TI never does that.
Yeah.
To me, like TI, and in fact, I think if I go through the top,
despite having a lot of modularity,
despite having a ton of modularity, the fundamentals of TI are like kind of always in place. And if I even look at the top like 100 BGG games, there are not that many games that I feel like really surprise me after I've played them for 10 or 20 times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They always kind of fold out the same way.
Yeah, they kind of always just sort of fold out the same way. And one thing I love about Root is the number of times where I like look at the board and I'm like, what is happening? Like, how do we get to this very odd moment?
Are you familiar with the video game Rain World?
Tom Brewster mentioned this game, and I remember like looking it up a little bit. Yeah, no, I haven't played it. I
definitely recommend like not even necessarily playing it, but just watching videos, because there's a really interesting design philosophy that they approached with creating the game. It's world forward, because normally when you design a video game, you focus on the character that the person is playing, because that's going to be like the main experience that they have the whole time. With Rain World, the world came first and the character was kind of secondary. Mm-hmm. And what you see is there's actually an ecosystem that's happening 90% of the time outside of the screen. Like you don't even have visibility to it, but it's still happening. And the ecosystem is designed in a way where there's just going to be things naturally occurring, so that as you are navigating this world, and ultimately it's just like a platformer game, but as you navigate it, it feels like it's lived in because it's literally happening, and like things will interact without you even being the focus. But it's interesting because like the only time I've ever seen anything analogous to what I feel like playing Root is playing that video game. I feel like there's like a through line there where like it's almost like the world itself was what was crafted and the ability for these things to interact with each other versus I am this player, I am this character, and here I go interfacing with the systems. I love like ecosystem based approaches to media.
Yes.
Another one is like there's this Weimar cinema film called M, Fritz Lang's M.
I know it.
I don't know that I would necessarily compare M to Root, but I do think it's like fascinating that like it's not a movie about the serial killer or about any particular character in the city. It's really about the city and how it reacts to and flows about these occurrences that are happening. So,
yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I love that like system forward game design is. I mean, when Root came out, and I would talk to people about Root. I mean, not like the first conversation, but the second conversation I would usually have with people about Root was about like this is a political ecosystem generator. And The actual game, what it feels like to play Root, kind of depends on what animals you put in the fish tank or whatever. That is something that informs basically my entire design practice. Like when I'm, and actually, well, here's a very small way it actually, that you see this in action. So when I'm working on game balance, at a certain point in development, you have to account for different player counts. This is a very important part of selling games. Games need to be able to work at a variety of player counts, usually, if you want them to sell well. So it's a thing that you have to do. And my philosophy is always let the player counts feel different. I am not trying to make the game feel the same at every player count. I want the 2-player, the 3-player, the 4-player, the 5-player to feel like they are their own beasts. And that's because the designs themselves are so kind of ecosystem forward. I think almost all the games I've worked on play very well at every player count, but they play very differently. And you have to know what sort of thing you're getting when you sit down to like play a game of Oath with 6 people and a game of Pamir with 2. Because those are not going to feel like the other count. So I don't even personally have like ideal player counts for any of the games that I work on.
So what you're saying is you secretly snuck 3 games in every game.
That's I'm
player count
yeah.
numbers.
My greatest flaw as a developer is I just love stuffing value in games.
That's why you're so big on the price point. So they're not paying $60 for Root. They're paying $60 like for 4 copies of Root.
Right.
I just work too hard. I just care too much about my.
I just care too much. No. I want like, I tell people all the time that like I work on games like any one of them is going to be my last. But I get really. I'm not a perfectionist, but the game has to be good enough that I would want to play it. And so that doesn't mean it needs to be perfect, but it does mean that when I'm working on a project, like if I feel like the team can make it better with a little bit more time, I will work on it longer. And, all my games have typos. There are always like little erratas in the first printing or whatever. Like I'm definitely not a perfectionist, but when we're playing a game, if someone ever says on the dev team, like, well, it's just a game or it's good enough, I will politely kick them out of the meeting. Because I can't have that energy. I really want us to be like treating our work with like a pretty sacred respect.
Oh, totally. Same here. Every time Tom says that, I kick him out of the Discord, and I just keep doing the podcast.
You bring up the Mario movie one more time, you're out.
Shall we move to the second segment?
I was actually going to bring up, like, the funniest thing is that, like, there was at some point a segue into games we've played recently, and we never got back to that. So here we go.
Cole, you had one you wanted to talk about.
I do have one I want to talk about. So I recently had a chance to play Virgin Queen. This is a game from 2012 by Ed Beach, published by GMT. So Virgin Queen is a game about the Elizabethan period. It covers the wars of religion, the Huguenots, basically like the time of Shakespeare. So it covers the late 16th century. Everyone's favorite subject for a game. It is a primarily six-player socio-political, economic, and military like simulator. It takes 10 hours. And I had the opportunity to play this game with a very experienced table. I was probably the most junior player in that crew. I had played twice a long time ago. But just that feeling of sitting down to play a multiplayer game with a bunch of people who know the game inside and out and will kind of like help you with little finer points of rules and never have to look up the rule book. Or they're able to be like, oh yeah, this is the answer. This is the reason why it's that way. I had not played a long game in a long time. Like I mostly these days play pretty short games or games I'm working on. Short games in the sense that I play like games that are 2 hours or less, or maybe 3 sometimes. But to sit down and say like, no, it's 11 in the morning. We're going to start playing. We will be done at midnight. It was remarkable. I was kind of reminded like why I love the form of games, like and what games can do when you just allow them to be big. I wanted to mention it because also there are a couple of things about it. So one, compared to TI, for instance, Virgin Queen knows it's a really big game, and I think the problem with TI is it's always like winking and being like, well, look, we're going to make it like a little simpler, a little faster, But Virgin Queen's like, no, this is a really big game. It's complicated. You're going to have to deal with it. And so Virgin Queen does these things. My favorite thing Virgin Queen does is it has a diplomacy phase. Every turn is 1 to 2 hours-ish once you get the hang of it. And a turn is... it's like playing a hand of cards. So you're going to have many impulses in one turn of Virgin Queen. So it's basically every turn of Virgin Queen is like a game in a legacy game, right? And then you play 6 games, and then you're a legacy game. But every turn starts with this 10-minute real-time diplomacy phase, where players can have conversations, they can make deals, they can talk to each other in private. And at the end of the diplomacy phase, you announce deals, you announce, marriages and alliances and, gifts that you're giving players. You don't have to tell everybody every part of the deal. So I could say like, yes, I'm going to give the Kingdom of France, I'm giving them 2 of my cards next turn. Now, no one knows what I'm getting back, but we have to like announce game state changes that are being enforced in the diplomatic phase. After we do that, we announce who we're going to war with. So like it may be that like France and England are going to be fighting, and it may be that the Turks and the Holy Roman Empire are going to be fighting, and everybody else is, neutral. And then here's the thing that is amazing. After that diplomacy phase, you can't table talk.
Oh.
You have to play the game. And you can be a little chatty, but like no deal making. If it's your turn, you need to act. And so what that means is like, oh, shoot, a battle went weird and like this happened and like some things that kind of like might reorder the political ecosystem of the game things might have gone a little off the rails. But you can't have a big conference about it until the next turn's diplomacy phase. And a lot of the reason why like TI can be so long is because in the last stages of TI, people are interrupting every action for these like very complicated king slaying, win making, like let's talk about the state of the world now that this person rolled slightly suboptimally in this one battle. And it's like, no, you have to just let it go. And then at the end of the round, to use TI's terminology, or the end of the like game turn or whatever they're called, you get a chance to like make your deals. And it was so refreshing. I really enjoyed it. And then the other thing I'll mention about Virgin Queen, because I think it's in fitting with the theme of the podcast, is when Virgin Queen first came out, I think a lot of people were pretty disappointed in it because it's complicated. And when people looked at it, so Virgin Queen is the second game in a series that started with a game called Here I Stand. And Virgin Queen is much prettier. It has like higher production values than Here I Stand. And I think when people saw Virgin Queen, they thought, GMT is making a more accessible Here I Stand. Look how pretty it is. And in fact, it was the opposite. They had made a game that was more complicated. It was also prettier, but it was just for that core audience. And the initial reviews, and I mean, and you can find them all over the place. There's even a shut up and sit down video about this game that is entirely about like how frustrating and confusing it was. Slowly, over the past 15 years, or a little less than that, past decade, there has been, I think, a growing critical consensus that like actually Virgin Queen is a masterpiece. And you just have to, like study it a little bit. Like the game demands a lot of its players. But if you are willing to invest that time, it's this marvelous, marvelous thing. And it has made me so happy that we have places in the board game community where people can evaluate games slowly, because most industries are very good at evaluating things quickly and are very bad at evaluating things slowly. And Virgin Queen to me is a game that has that continues to shine, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 10 years it even shines, all the more brightly.
Do you think we're more likely or less likely to get that kind of game nowadays? Like, is there a Virgin Queen in the making in 2025?
Funny that you ask, because the third game in the series came out last year. It's called Tanto Manta, and it's even prettier than Virgin Queen, and it's even more complicated. And when it came out, all of the same like poo-pooing happened, where people were like, oh, it's so complicated, it's so chromy, X and Y and Z. And I read the rules and thought, yes, this game is very complicated. I definitely do not have the patience and time and group to play it at this moment. But part of me wondered in the back of my mind, like, is this game also potentially like a stone cold masterpiece that's just going to take a decade for me to like figure out how to...
It's going to be another 10 years. Yeah.
It's going to be like another 10 years. I mean, I'm a huge sucker for large scale, like, artistic works that took a long time to execute and take a long time to be appreciated. It's like, if anyone tells me like, oh, this piece of music was worked on for 20 years and no one really listened to it for like the first 5 years after it came out, I am like instantly engaged. I want to learn everything about it. I love reading like a long book that took a long time to write. So I do think that there's a place for that kind of work. It's just, it can be a little bit hard to find because much of the work that's happening is disposable in good and bad ways, right? I mean, sometimes, and I use Amabel Holland's work as a reference here because she has described her practice as like increasingly zine-like. So this is Holland Spiel. She designs a lot of interesting games, including most recently, she designed this game called City of Six Moons, which is like in a alien language, and you have to decode the game to learn how to play it. And she describes a lot of her work as like being like not quite off the cuff, but like designed quickly, published quickly, not polished on purpose because she wants to move to the next project. And that I think is a very like healthy and interesting creative practice. And then there's a bad kind of disposable too, where it's like things aren't finished, and they're just pushed out because they want to make Essen or whatever.
You're just saying like your creative process can look like that, and it's not cynical or it's not driven by just getting as many things generating passive income as possible or whatever. It's a different mindset. Speaking of Amabel Holland, I think like one of our favorites of hers is Irish Gauge.
I love that game. I adore it.
But that one has like a considerable amount of polish. But that was one she released with like a larger publisher. It wasn't through Holland Spiel. So.
Well, it was originally through this company called Winsome Games, which is a like really just a development group based in Pittsburgh. And I think both Northern Pacific and Irish Gauge got a lot of polish from that dev group. I don't know if that's true of like London and Northwestern and some of her other ones that she did with them. She also made this game called I think it's called Trans-Siberian Rails, which is very good. It's super neat. Irish Gauge is really special because I find that game to be it is delightful in a way that train games are often not delightful. And I think it's because so whenever we have uncertainty in games, like uncertainty always has like texture to it. And the way those like cubes work is just really fun. It's just like so interesting to see like what kind of outputs come out when you're like drawing those three cubes. It's like just the right amount of uncertainty. And it makes like the auction like slightly silly or like catty maybe. I adore
like you're sort of like pressuring other people to be the one that actually pulls the cubes out of the bag because like it feels almost like a waste of your own turn.
Yes.
Yeah, you want someone else to do it for you. I love that feeling with it.
This is like the duality of Taylor is happening right now because her favorite designer is saying that train games are great. And she refuses to play train games for some reason.
Can I like here's my defense of train games. Train games to me are the perfect unification of spatial and more abstract like economic considerations where you are interested in like questions of technology and liquidity and position and timing, and then also there's this spatial component that they're getting mapped onto and they're talking to each other on both sides. I adore train games. I have boxes and boxes of these Winsome train games. So Amabel's games are published by this publisher called Winsome Games. The way Winsome Games used to work doesn't work like this way anymore. Is they had a Yahoo group, and once a year they would say, "Yep, we've got our set of games ready. If you want the games, here are their titles. Here's one sentence about each game. It will cost you a money order of $150. Mail it to me, and I'll send you your games." And you would mail this money. I'd walk to the post office. I would mail this money order, and then a week or two later, I would get 3 plastic clamshells with components that looked like they were designed in AutoCAD, and we would play the heck out of them. They were so interesting. And actually, it's another one of Amabel's games. I love people who don't play train games. I love playing Northern Pacific with them. Because Northern Pacific is such a beautiful game about collaboration and betrayal. And it has like 3 rules and it takes 10 minutes to play. And you can just play it over and over and over and over again. And I think it is just a remarkable achievement.
Nice.
I think it's Amabel's best game. And I love a lot of her games.
Wow. Okay.
Okay.
Play Northern Pacific.
I'm adding like so many games to my wanted playlist just from this
good, yeah.
review. It's like,
Don't worry, they're all old. They're all old.
yeah. Well, that's the other thing too, is like, how am I going to get a hold of these? I'm going to have to find a convention to go to later this year. And
I've noticed Amabel's games come up a lot in math trades. So maybe this is the time, Tom, to join me in the
on the dark side
the
of
math trading game ecosystem.
It's time to stop BSing about all the crap we've been yapping about. Virgin Queen, bunch of war games, train games. Who cares?
I can't help but
one wants
notice
to
that
talk
you're not
about that.
saying bunch of bullshit like you usually do, because you're like, oh, I don't want to upset Cole.
I swear so much. Yeah,
Okay.
I know it's fine.
All right, fine. Fuck it. Enough of this bullshit. It's time to get into the real meat and potatoes of the podcast, because we literally are running out of time, unfortunately. And that's the reason people tune in every week. They want to talk about board game organization this week. Yeah, Kenny, why don't you take this one away? Because I feel like you came up with the ideas.
The people have spoken. They want to know how we organize our games. And it was a little vague, so I intentionally kind of left this vague because I think there's different ways of organizing things. I don't think it's like how you should organize things, because I'm going to make a wild statement here. I don't think there's a right way to organize.
I do.
Okay, well.
It's by color.
Like a pottery barn.
I do think that people have opinions about this, though. So maybe we can start with the physical collection, because that's like the immediate thing that comes to mind. It's like the games themselves, how they're organized. Do either of you have like a preferred way, or is it kind of anything goes?
I'm married to a librarian's daughter who organizes books so carefully, and my books are not organized carefully. They are ordered in whatever order they happen to be in, and I just kind of remember where things are, because I like it when things that are unlikely shelf mates happen to be sitting next to each other. However, with games, it's a little different. I mean, I have a question for you all, but I'm going to answer it first, which is, do you keep your games in one place? So my games are currently split in 4 places.
Oh, wow.
So I have like my office at work has all of the games that are like even tangentially related to things that I'm working on, or like stuff that we play in the office. And then I have a little office at my house in the attic, which is where all of the historical games live, because I mostly do whirligig stuff at home. And then in our dining room, we have a small shelf of like the games that are in high rotation, the things we're playing a lot of right now. So like at this moment, it's like Eidolon, Quacks, the Netrunner decks are there. We have like Lords of Vegas, Dungeon Quest is there, because my kids have been playing it lately. Key to the Kingdom. I mean, like, these are like the games that we're playing on it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Castle of Burgundy is there too. It's like what in like Agricola, like things that we might pull down after dinner to play are on that floor. And then in our basement, which is where the kids mostly play video games and build forts and stuff, we have like all of the Euros and the like. If we're having people over to play games, those all kind of like sit down there. The games that are okay for public consumption.
I'm not when you said you had you play games at work, I was like, oh sweet, me too. And then I realized like, oh okay, yeah, you.
It's like what you do for work in a way, yeah. I'm writhing a little bit because like we don't have the time to talk about Eidolon, but oh man,
it's really good.
Yeah, you got to come back
really
just so we can talk about Eidolon, and we'll have that as a bonus episode or something.
Eidolon is so good.
So do you find that you keep your games together, or are they?
Yeah, my answer is like I also have them in 4 places at the moment. So I have games that I've checked out from the library. Then I have the games that I own. But then there's games that like are technically more the kids own them / I don't necessarily care if the pieces disappear. Kind of. And so those are on like those are on a low shelf in a different bookshelf. And then I have a small pile of games that I'm like, I kind of want to get rid of this, and so I keep that in my office just because I'm gonna sell it soon, either on eBay or like at the next local swap.
I have them all in one place. It doesn't cause me grief or anxiety if they're not in the same spot. Like I'm not like stressed and compulsive about it, but as just like a personal preference, I like to have it all in one place. I have been dabbling or considering segmenting them between more for my sake and a section that's more for like the family, but I haven't pulled the trigger because I just every time I explore it, I'm like having a hard time with that line. It's just so blurred.
Yeah, there's a funny, I mean, I used to feel, so war games are tricky because they're really long and complicated, right? And I used to feel like a little guilty about owning war games because I'm like, do I have time for this like 14-hour game on the 7-Year War? The answer is no. but so I have this kind of like, you know, this dual standard, which is the games, I tend to keep games that I am playing or like to play. And then I also keep games that I like to think about.
Same.
And then everything else goes, really. So like I don't really hold on to games for like emotional reasons with like one or two exceptions. Or like if I've played a game a lot, I am very likely to give it away to someone.
Yeah.
And so I mean I have the same thing about my books. Where, like the books I hold on to are books that I like use for reference and books I haven't read. A lot of the books I've read a lot I just give away because I'm good. I don't need it anymore.
I'm perfectly okay getting rid of a game even if I love it. If I feel like it's not providing anything for me, which I know sounds a little cold, but it's like it's the reality, right? Like it's brought me that joy. I thank it for what it provided me, and then I move it along. So,
well, it's like in Toy Story 3. Like, Andy has finished playing with the toys, and he's giving it out to the next generation to be re-exhausted by a new spirit.
Well, because the games are going to have, I mean, it's my favorite thing about the whole form of the game is that, and this is what I tell people when we're working on games at Leader, like games as an object, like they have like 100-year lifespan. Part of that lifespan is giving it away, selling it, abandoning it, you know, like that is just part of what's going to happen in the life of that game. And it's okay. Just sort of move it along, because there was a time in my life that if somebody were handing out like a war game for free or for $5 or whatever, I would have jumped at it. I go to these and now I like have no interest in receiving games. Like I do not.
Don't give him a game as a gift at the convention.
Please do not, unless it's something real weird. So I do I like have too many games in my life right now. It's kind of strange because I don't consider myself really a collector. But when you do it professionally, you just kind of like get games, like it's just you just sort of slowly accrue them. And so what I'll do is that there's a flea market in the Twin Cities every 6 months or something. And I will just bring like 4 or 5 tubs of games, and I just make it like, this is the $30 stack, the $20 stack, the $10 stack, and the free stack. And over the course of the flea market, I just push things further down, like it's like a Dutch auction. Because my goal is to exit the flea market with 0 games, and I'm like not trying to raise money or anything. I'm raising like the babysitter fund. No,
that's a good way to do it. I like the idea of like every day it's like they progress, like they degrade. To the next bucket.
I need to scoot them. And there are some exceptions. There are things that I hold on and feel strongly about. But
as far as like physically, like, or I guess positionally, how they're organized, is there any patterns to that? At least like for me, I use a system where I have the games that are most likely to come off the shelf, likely like games that have a broader appeal near the bottom. And then the games that are more niche near the top, because it's harder to reach those games anyway.
That's interesting.
His bottom starts at like waist level, just to clarify.
Okay. So physicality. Where a kid is gonna, like that the candy.
Yeah,
level.
Exactly. Yeah, so the kid games are down there, the gateway games, and then a lot of the games that just we play very often, even if they are higher complexity. And then I'll have things like the con sims and the heavily econ games near the top, because I know that's like a once in a while kind of thing.
He's not saying PAX Premier, but it's on the higher side.
PAX Premier is near the top.
I always do spine, so I like to keep my games like bookcase style spine, especially for war games. And then I have a similar treatment. Like the attic is only where my weird stuff is. Like there's, we use our attic as like my office / our guest bedroom. And I always feel a little bad when people visit because I'm like, welcome to my like weird like I mean, there is some, I will say, I'm brushing off my shoulder right here. There's some rare stuff up here. There's some real like strong museum of play. Like they only made 5 of those. But mostly for our house guests, it's like Cole's like attic of curiosities.
Yeah.
Thanks for staying with us, Grandma. I know that you don't care about this, but there's some.
But
really
like this
cool
is an
stuff
almost
here.
complete collection of Kevin Zucker's operational Napoleonic games.
Wow.
That took me, and so it is but those games are not in circulation. Like they are, anybody who comes over to our house for a party or we're playing game, like they don't even see those games.
It's funny how amazed you can be by something that you've managed to get a hold of, and how meaningless it is to like the majority of people. You know what I mean?
I have a couple games that I spent probably over 5 years looking for.
Wow.
They are utterly meaningless to like anyone but myself and like 4 other people.
But as long as they
awesome,
matter
though.
to you, I feel like that's the most important thing.
Yeah. You said you keep them on their spine. You mean like the box would lay flat or whatever, but you're saying no, tilt that shit.
Yeah, exactly. They it looks like a book, like a shelf of books.
So it sounds like it's an aesthetic motivation, though, not like the gravity of it.
I do think that is a better way to put games on the shelf, but it's frustrating because I always worried about stressing the components in ways that they weren't meant to. And I recently had the thought, like, I wish more games would actually design themselves to be supported inside in that orientation, right?
Yeah, because like a mounted board will warp if you stack it on the side.
Also, a lot of inserts just don't account
They
for...
just don't work.
Yeah, the pieces fall out.
Yeah, like brass Lancashire, for example, I have like the one with the big orange insert and everything. And like if I put it on its spine, all the cards are just going to start sliding around, and I'm worried that they're going to get like bent if a little too much pressure is put in the wrong
I
spot.
literally from my desk just pulled my copy of brass Lancashire off my shelf because I realized I had it stored on my spine, and I'm just going to make sure that I didn't screw it up. So I want you to know I'm doing that right now. I think we're going to be okay. I think it's going to be okay.
Those cards have fallen out of place. I can guarantee it. But especially my copy, it's like they're sleeved up, so they're closer to like the surface.
All right, my unsleeved copy is okay. I know everyone was so concerned about my copy of Brash Lancashire that just it was literally I didn't have to move. I rotated my chair 10 degrees to pick that off my shelf. Now, why that's up in the attic is kind of damning. Because I like that game. That should be downstairs. What's it doing there? Up here.
Yeah.
Migration.
Oh, Lancashire or Birmingham?
Oh, Lancashire.
Hell yes. Boom.
No contest, really.
It's kind of a ubiquitous life hack at this point for board gamers, but just in case, I'm throwing it out there in the ether. If you do have that insert stuff floating around, one quick trick is you can keep the punch out cardboard frame that the tokens came in and put that at the bottom of the box below whatever insert. And that'll oftentimes push up the insert so that it's flush with the top of the box. Although I have noticed, because my copy of Kalis 1303 had this, and I think Waterfall Park did this recently. Now they'll print the game where the box will come elevated, and the cardboard punch out things will actually elevate the box higher than it's supposed to be, so that when you take them out, eventually when you punch out the pieces, the box will come down, but the insert will already be flush for you.
Yeah, because like it's in shrink, so they can do it like that. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
How do you find the new edition of Kalis, by the way?
I preferred it to the old one. I had some frustrations about the whole Asmodee and there being so I was provided with 14 pieces of food and then a pink meeple for the 15th piece.
That's fascinating.
Which is a little dystopian, a little Soylent Green for me, but and then I went on the Asmodee website and they said, we do not care.
we do not care. It is what it is.
Yeah, you got the second hand. We do not care that it was still in shrink. You are shit out of luck because we will not replace that piece for you. And so that rubbed me a little the wrong way. But that's nothing to do with the game. I think the game was fun.
I think it's I really like Kalis. I think the new edition is really neat. Yeah. I think I prefer the original only because that's the one I played a lot. It's a fully nostalgic preference. I think that the 1303 is probably a better game.
Yeah, I don't have the nostalgia, so for me it was just like, oh yeah, I feel like this is a little bit more streamlined. So, Tom, do you have a system, or you kind of like? Can I guess what your system is? You have like
Sure.
a 2-player cubby, and then the rest is just the Wild West.
Kinda. I got it to a point where it was sorted almost like as a grid, where it was like the higher the player count and the higher the complexity. Because my bookshelf's like the bottom is literally
Okay, that's cool. I do like that because there's like a rhyme and reason to it.
Right. So like the floor is harder to pull stuff out of, I think, than like the middle or the top even. And so like the lighter fare is more towards the top and the higher player counts are more towards the right, if I remember correctly.
No.
So that's why all the 2 players are in like the top left corner, and then everything kind of branches outwardly.
All right, so this is surprising me because I'm realizing I made an assumption that everybody did this, and now I'm feeling like I'm a crazy person. So I sort by designer.
We have a friend who does that.
Like all of my like Rosenberg games are kind of in the same area. All of my
No.
Even if they're different publishers or box sizes.
I have the Carl Tuck-Chuddick cube that just has all the tucking games, which includes Race for the Galaxy for some reason, but
Sure.
But that's about it. Everything else is mechanism driven, I would say, mostly. I
Oh,
don't know.
interesting. Yeah, because I go like publisher. I sort by publisher and by designer, and usually that covers it.
Yeah, for me, it's like what the delivery is of, or the intent behind the game, which I know is rather arbitrary. People often make fun of my organizational system, and there's like a mini game when a new person comes to the house, which is like guess how these are organized, because it's like impossible to guess the categories. There's like a cube that's like games people will not play with me, and then there's another shelf that has specifically deck builders with something extra, but not regular deck builders and stuff like that. So the
Deck builders with a twist.
yeah, deck builders with a spice. But then I have stuff in there like Concordia, and people are like, that doesn't even fit into that category. So I don't know what you're talking about. So it makes sense in my head.
Yeah. Concordia is like a better version of a deck builder.
There's something to touch on there, I'm sure. But I was gonna say, I think I don't own more than like 2 games by any one designer off the top of my head.
Maybe that's
like,
the
I
difference.
think
Yeah.
if I were to sort by designer, it's like Fields of Arle, L'Ave, and Bonanza are like, I think that might be like the most. Oh, and Patchwork. So I could get 4 Uwe games on one shelf, but I don't think I have more than like 2 of anyone else that I can think of.
Yeah, I think my collection is increasingly like there are 10 designers I like, and I have a lot of each of their games.
Stuff. Okay, it makes more sense that you'd organize it by that. Yeah.
So one of the ways I like shop for games is I love going to used games store. I mean, the Twin Cities is a blessed place for games shopping because we have a gazillion game stores. And I will be like looking through the used racks being like, oh, like this is a Colvini game I've never heard of that has like a 6.2 on BGG. That is almost certainly coming home with me. Because I love games with like low BGG scores from designers I really love and respect.
Nice.
You ever tried, was it Bear Park?
Bear Valley?
Bear Valley.
Yeah, Bear Park. I do know Bear Park.
Well, there's Barren Park, and then there's Bear Valley by Carl Chuddick. Have you played
I have
Valley?
not played Bear Valley.
I recommend playing it. It's not good.
He is so I mean, Carl Chuddick is interesting because I like a lot of his games, but I also do not own all of his games because there are lots of his games that do not work for me that he's designed.
A lot of Chuddick talk this episode.
Yeah, who knew?
It's come up a lot. Do you think this is an agreeable statement? Motainai is Monopoly Deal. It's a Monopoly Deal re-implementation of sorts.
There's a lot of backstory to the statement.
I have not played Monopoly Deal, but
what?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Okay. How old were your kids again?
My kids are 11, 9, and 5.
The 11 and 9-year-old, I think actually all of them probably could play Monopoly Deal. So you can find it at probably any thrift store for $2
Hell
or
yeah,
less.
that's what I'm talking about.
It's almost always like in the baggies at my thrift stores. So
It's a point of contention
pick it
amongst
up.
our listeners for sure.
Try it out with your kids because it is playable with them. I want to know what you think.
Okay.
Tweet me on, skeet me on Blue Sky.
Yeah, I will.
I need to know.
Do we want to briefly talk about like virtual collections? It looks like you considerably log your plays, Cole. I'm stalking
I
right
used to. You
used to.
So
Okay.
my BGG account is a strange thing. As I mentioned, I've been like a pretty active user since 2003. And I used to be extremely active. I used to be I'm posting many times a day. I'm involved in too many arguments. And when I shifted to working professionally in the industry and working on games, that section of my time kind of evaporated. So I am on BGG every day, but I usually get on to check forums, to do like a little bit of light browsing to see what's going on, and then I hop off. Like it's a very, very small part of my day. And I've decided, instead of like keeping my BGG profile up to date, it is a little time capsule of like the last time I was really active on the site. So I've just like frozen it. I used to write a lot of comments and had a very like up to date. This is what I'm playing. This is my collection. But the problem that I found is I would write a comment and then people would start sending me messages about a comment that I had written. and it was just like, and I'm not even opposed to it. It was just generating work. And then I started feeling a little weird because I have lots of hot game takes, and I'm okay sharing them, but I'm not okay sharing them in a way that is easily cited and screen capped and then sent to me. I'll say this kind of like as a top level thing. I do not like most games, especially most games that have come out in the last like 3 years. I think I am increasingly at odds. There was a time when if I looked at the top 100 BGG games, I had played every one of those games like more than 5 times. And now I look at the top 100 games and I think like, I don't really like most of these games. And in fact, like I've watched ARCs kind of like rise through the ranks, and I don't know if it's going to make it into the top 100. I think there's a good chance it'll like sit sort of in the top half of the top 100. But when I'm watching ARCs rise up, the like 200 to 300 and the 100 to 200 section, I'm like, I don't know if ARCs is better than that game. But when I get to the 100 mark, I'm like, ARC should be in the top 10.
We had a very similar conversation recently, Because
I don't know.
I'm very much with you on this broadly. Yeah.
Like I don't think SETI's good. I don't think it's that good. I'm sorry, SETI.
Wow.
I think SETI is an okay game. I think it's okay.
I haven't played it yet, so I'll reserve
it's
judgment.
fine.
But,
I think like Arc Nova, bad.
Yes.
but this is why I can't be put. I mean, I don't mind saying it on a podcast, and I'm being a little glib. I'm sure Arc Nova is for someone, but like I played a game of Lost Ruins of Arnak, and I was like, this is the sleepiest hour and a half of my life.
Oh no, okay.
But here's the thing: like I respect the hell out of Arc Nova. I know it's for somebody. And it seems like it's for a lot of people. It's just like really not what I'm interested in. When I sit down to play a game, I'm like, any of the questions that Arc Nova is asking, I'm kind of just not interested in. I literally just opened up the top 100 because I wanted to have them in my mind a little bit. Yeah. Like Nemesis is another really interesting game for me, where I've played Nemesis 4 times. I've played 2 of the one where you're on the like outpost and 2 of the one where you're on the ship. Mm-hmm. And I have never liked it. Because it felt really slow and it just felt like turgid. I felt like it was like it was like the kind of game that FFG would be making if they had kept making games, and they're kind of
feels like a very
period.
FFG game, yeah.
In their bloated period, and like Station Fall hits 4 times as hard with less rules and less playtime. And so I just don't, and I'm like, and how is Nemesis 23rd and Station Fall is like probably not even the top 1,000? I'm like, there's no justice in this world,
right?
And then, I'll give another one. Like Feast for Odin is another game that like I admire the hell out of Feast for Odin. I love Rosenberg games. I've played many of them, and Feast for Odin I think is like, it's a real like masterwork. It is also a game that I find like a little embarrassing because it has so many pieces. Like as a designer, if I had to like say like, hey guys, thanks for having me on. Here's my new game. It comes with its own organization tray, and there's like 80 unique pieces. I would feel embarrassed. I would have to leave the room because I would be so embarrassed to show you my game. However, I do think Feast for Odin is a work of genius and is an incredible piece of design, because speaking as a designer, what I love about Feast for Odin is it found a way to do a geometric proof of Euro games. When you're a kid, you learn the Pythagorean theorem. If you're in college, you might see a geometric proof of the Pythagorean theorem and how it can be worked out fully spatially. And to me, Feast for Odin is hey, you know how many victory points that shirt is worth? Well, let me show you the spatial logic of Feast for Odin. and it's amazing because it doesn't need to put a little this is worth 2 victory points or whatever. You can just fully you can fully work it out. There are some really good games on the list, right? Concordia is great, Terra Mystica is great, but there's also just a lot of stuff here that I can't believe. I am so surprised Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle-earth has done so well, because I find it so boring. And I think it's maybe because if you've played Lord of the Rings The Confrontation, this is the Renner Knizia game from 2000, probably 8 or something.
Doing a reprint, by the way.
That game is awesome. It is so interesting, and to me it captures the spirit of Lord of the Rings so beautifully. Duel for Middle-earth is fine. It's a drafting game. It's again, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying I'm surprised that some people think it's the greatest game ever made.
It's funny because I really did like the system quite a bit. I haven't played Confrontation, so I don't know if that's maybe why I am not super into it. But I think what I like most about Duel for Middle-earth is pretty much everything that I liked about Seven Wonders Duel in the first place, to be fair.
I like Seven Wonders Duel.
I will say that the Ring Wraith track, it's almost like a little toy in there. Yeah. I think that is really, really cool. You have to admit.
Oh, right? It is cool. But but also, don't you recognize that something is a little busted about our way of evaluating games?
Right.
You mentioned the 100 greatest games ever made. I think it's important to note that that's not what the top 100 is. And I don't even think BGG asserts that that's what it is.
No, it's the games that do well with the way that they are ranked and collected and all those things.
Yeah, it's the games that come with the best toys, really, is what we're learning.
The games that have maintained enough people voting on, enough people ranking them recently that also rank them relatively highly. And so that's a very specific niche. And in that context, it makes a little bit more sense why certain games show up.
The way I think about the top 100 is, there is a general audience of BGG fan that likes certain types of games. And then there are these other audiences that really only like very, very specific types of games, but they will rank them. And if that audience gets big enough, Gloomhaven was my poster child for a long time for this, where there were a lot of people who love Gloomhaven deeply. And there's a lot to love in Gloomhaven, right? They're ranking it very highly, and there were so many Gloomhaven fans that they were able to become like a voting block. TI is kind of in the same category,
oh, yeah,
right?
For
Where
sure.
the TI players are not the players playing like Lord of the Rings Duel.
I would even argue, going back to Ark Nova, that's a similar kind of feeling, where there's like a voting block specifically for those like heavy tableau builders. Heavy as in like there's a lot of cards, not as in like complexity.
Yeah.
I mean, I find myself sometimes pining for the smaller BGG, because when I started being an active user on BGG, playing games, ranking them, thinking about them, it was really like one community, and you could look at the top 100 and you're like, yeah, this one community thinks that these are the top games. And I'm going to use the word think with like big air quotes around it, right? Like, to what degree is a community like quote unquote thinking? Like, I don't know. But there was a coherence to it. And as BGG has grown, as the industry has grown, that list has lost coherence.
Right.
And so it's not really like, I'm not really just going out being like, I don't like X game, I don't like Y game. It's like, what I'm missing is a list with coherence. And instead I'm seeing like, I look at that list and I'm like, wow, there are a lot of Ark Nova fans. There are a lot of Gloomhaven fans. There are a lot of Terraforming Mars fans.
Like,
there are a lot of Root.
blocks.
Yeah. There are a lot of Root fans. I mean, like, Root is on that list for kind of the same reasons that Ark Nova is on that list. I'm not accepting my own work at all. Like, my work is powered by that same thing that animates it, right? But by that same thing that organizes the entire list. But when I look at the list, I look through the list and I think, boy, I don't think I belong to any of these voting blocks, like as a player.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. Like again, you asked me to talk about a game I played. I talked about flipping Virgin Queen. Like that's a game that doesn't even register on the dang scale. And there are a lot of games that I kind of like admire on this list. But if you page back a few pages, what happens is you get to what the list looked like last year or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and you see things like War of the Ring and Chaos in the Old World and Dune and Memoir and Sekigahara and Cosmic Encounter and Game of Thrones and Go and Ora and Labora. And I'm like, oh yeah, now we're like hitting. These are tissue. I mean, these are like classics.
Yeah, the one we always come back to is Tigris and Euphrates dropping off the 100. That was kind of a wild one for us.
Oh yeah, because I mean that like I could play that game. I could play that game so much. I don't know. It's a funny thing. I don't want to say it doesn't matter because like it super does matter. People who are just starting out in the hobby. Yeah, I mean maybe that's the thing that I get. I'm not like clutching pearls or anything, but someone who's just starting at the hobby and they're looking for game recs, they often find their way to that list. And it's the degree to which it isn't incoherent, that the list itself is incoherent, means that some poor new person is going to like pick up a copy. They're like, we're going to the store and coming home with Nemesis and Ark Nova. What kind of evening are you about to embark upon?
BGG has been experimenting with showing other things than the hotness on the front page. Maybe it's a similar thing where the problem isn't the list itself, it's how it's emphasized. Like maybe they just need to de-emphasize the top 100 and have the top 100 bestsellers or top 100. Because I think that data came out and the top 10 most in collections or something looked more representative of like a beginner's list.
Yes.
So
yes.
I don't know. Maybe that's the approach. I don't even know if there's an answer.
There's a way to change like the all board games thing by the number of voters. If you resort the list by that rather than like its rank, it's like Catan, Carcassonne, Pandemic, Seven Wonders, Terraforming Mars, Wingspan. It's like if that's how you started the hobby.
Probably better than Brass, Ark Nova,
right.
Twilight Imperium.
No, like I just did that, and this list is so much more. It makes so much more sense. Pandemic and Carcassonne and Catan all sitting on the shelf next to each other, and they're all
Roots there too.
And Roots
pretty high up there.
Root, I mean, we have sold copies. I mean, it's so funny to even say this as a designer because it seems obvious, but you'd be surprised how not obvious it is. The biggest trick to doing a game that does well is people have to play it.
What?
I know what, but actually, like you would be surprised how oftentimes people are designing games where they're like, yeah, this is really designed for like the first time someone plays it, and I know people are going to play it once or twice and then they're going to pass it on. And I'm like, man, if I'm looking at this list of most sold games and I see Kark, Catan, Pandemic, Seven Wonders, Terraforming Mars, Wingspan, Seven Wonders Duel, and Azul. So that's like, I don't know, the top 10 or whatever. When I say those names, the people I know who play those games have played them dozens of times.
Mm-hmm.
And as designers, like we should be sensitive to the fact that like our games only live when they're being played.
Yeah.
And that we should be trying to build games that are played. And that is something that I will say for Root. Like Root is a project that I worked on a lot and cared about a lot almost a decade ago. I am not like an active Root player. I help work on the expansions. I have a lot of opinions about like its design aesthetics. It is a game that I still like think very fondly of, but I know that I'm not an active Root player. But Root is a game that gets played. It has an extremely active community. And for that reason, its existence on both of these lists is just an index of the fact that it has an active community. And I think that to me is my favorite thing about the problem of designing a really good game is you have to design a game that like kind of wants to be played.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the same thing that we found with Arcs, and I mean even like Mollyhouse is a good example of it because Mollyhouse is kind of like it's had a weird interaction with BGG where it's doing like fine on BGG. It's getting it like weird bigots rating it lowly, which is I don't lose any sleep over the weird bigots, but it's getting played a ton outside of BGG.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I'm not surprised.
I will like routinely run into people who are like, oh yeah, man, Molly House, once you get 10 games in, it really starts singing. And I'm like, oh yeah, cool, good. I'm like glad you're actually engaging with it. And that is a very different thing than designing a game that is like interesting. You play once or twice and then you sell or you put it on your shelf.
Yeah, Molly House really surprised me because Cole, your designs, bless their heart, they are what I call like bathtub games, which is like I love taking a bath, but it's always like it's an ordeal. It's like a process for me to actually get into the bath, and then when I'm there, I'm like I'm loving this. Why don't I do this every day? And because they're ambitious, there's like so much going on. They're not games that you can just 5-minute teach, get in, go. You have to actually invest time and effort into playing them.
There's always a flow chart involved.
Yep. and if I didn't make the flow chart, there's gonna be a fan flow chart that someone else is gonna make.
So going into my first game of Molly House and a new game alert, I was prepared for that. I was like, okay, let's do the Cole thing. You know, we're gonna learn this game. It's gonna take us a little bit, but as soon as we get going, it's gonna be awesome. I didn't experience that with Molly House. The moment you hit the ground running, it feels surprisingly like, I wouldn't say like a light game. It's not a light game for
it's
sure.
like definitely not. Yeah.
But there's like a breeziness to it that is like, oh wow. The sentiment is like, I thought this was going to be complicated. There's a snappiness to even just picking it up that felt really nice. I've been loving my time with.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear it. It is like it's a weird game because it and ARCs are kind of cut from the same cloth. It's like no surprise they were both worked on around the same time.
Right.
Where I think for certain groups, it short circuits people and they get like completely like lost in the way the games treat uncertainty. But if you can kind of ride on its wavelength, it's very snappy.
Yeah, I see that for ARCs, but I felt like Molly House just like clicked. It might have just been a personal thing, but like all four of us at the table, it just like made sense to us. So you make good games, Cole.
Thanks.
I don't know that we mentioned that, but yeah.
Thank you.
Wanted to get that in there. It's very rare that an artist sees success and also produces like impactful and meaningful art. Usually it's like they die and then they get recognized, or like they're just very niche or something like that. But I feel like you've had the benefit of both being recognized for things like Root, as well as like making works that Amabel is proud to talk about, for example.
I will just say, as the person who's experiencing it, it's very odd to me.
You're living the dream to a certain extent.
Well, I mean, I work, I do this stuff full time, and I love my job. Like, it's Sunday. I can't wait to go to work on Monday here. It's possible because the board game audience is really special because it is a super active community. Mm-hmm. And people will trash on BGG because it's a little bit of like a walled garden and maybe some of their back-end finances are a little goofy and whatever. I mean, they're like, especially in the content creator sphere, people have a lot of like opinions about BGG. But I love it.
Oh, yeah.
I love it because BGG is an imperfect but functioning like community hub.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it is protecting board games.
For sure.
In a way that like video games don't have that.
Yeah, there's no centralized.
Yeah, there's nothing centralized. And the fact that I can like look on BGG and see, this thing, I used to think it was so stupid, the hotness, right? This like list of games. Mm-hmm. But like what that's doing is it's kind of like providing a spotlight. All sorts of weird stuff like comes up through that list.
Yes, that's true.
That like wouldn't otherwise be there. Every once in a while you're like, how'd this game get here? And someone's like, oh yeah, some podcaster mentioned this odd game and now we're all talking about Worm Up or whatever. That is really special and it like enables me to do the kind of work that we do. And then the other thing I'll just mention from a creative practice standpoint, I have gotten to know a lot of people who work in design and who also have full-time, their dream jobs. And one thing that I've noticed is I kind of sort them into a couple different categories because I do think a lot of people are like looking for a hit. I really do think about the games I work on as being like conversations with the audience around the game. And so, for example, when I like show a game, sometimes I'll show games I'm working on to reviewers that I trust when the game is still in progress. And if the reviewer has like a negative opinion about it, like I'll talk to them about it and just be like, hey, why isn't this working? And sometimes they'll have really great feedback. I mean, Premiere is my classic example of that. I sent Dan Thoreau.
He told us, yeah.
Yeah, a copy of Premiere, second edition. He was like, I don't like this. And I'm like, you know what? I can do better. I'm going to try to do better. And it wasn't like I was focus grouping it, but his disappointment was like, it put fire in my belly.
Yeah, he said, ask him about the time I fixed Pax Pamir.
Very good. Yes. I mean, Dan, like, and I think I try to be really critical of my own work. And if I can't be critical of it, I find other people to be critical for me. Premiere was really interesting because a lot of my testers were Premiere 1 testers. I mean, Premiere's testing is like that's a whole saga. But they were really unhappy that I was like turning Premiere into the second edition. And Dan was a cusper. He was right on the edge. I could tell that he like kind of wanted me to make it
right,
like Premiere 1 was. And I was able to use his dislike and kind of route it and to be like, no. The only way out is through. I have to go like further into this like strange treatment of the design to get it to actually like hold water properly. That was true. I mean, Arcs was really funny in that regard too, because Arcs was a game that was like finished twice. Like there was a version of it that we finished, and then I took it to Gen Con. I played it with my brother, and I played it, we were showing it. This was after the crowdfunding campaign. And a lot of people really liked it. Like the response on the floor was very good. But then when I was just working on it with Drew and just talking about it, I'm like, I'm so unsatisfied with this game. And I got really down on myself about it because I'm like, I think the idea is really good, but the game wasn't measuring up to the original concept.
Yeah.
That's me imagining myself as a player of my own games. The reason I love showing Dan games is because I've played games with Dan. I like Dan, and to a degree, his sensibility as a player is like very close to my own. This is not uncommon, right? When Lucas was working on Star Wars, he showed it to like all of his other film brat friends, and they all shat on it and talked about it, and that helped him fix it.
Yeah.
And this is to me a very normal part of the process. So like I like love showing like Tom Brewster, for instance, like in progress games. And I'm like, hey, this thing's busted. I'm working on it. What do you think of it? And sometimes it's like, yeah, this isn't really working, or this is interesting. Or I played in progress version of Oath with Elaine and Efka. And at the end they were like, this is so weird because this game feels like a total mess, but it like makes sense narratively. It was kind of too late in the process to actually change Oath. But as I'm working on the expansion, I've thought about that conversation so much because I'm thinking about like, I like Oath's problem is one of like coherence. If I'm going to make it bigger, I need to make sure that everything kind of like makes sense. It doesn't feel like I'm just strapping systems to each other. This is a part of the creative practice, but it's a big reason why I think the games have done really well. I am not going to be done with the game until I am having a really good time playing it and I'm watching other people get interested in the game. And I know that like we built a boat that's like really floating, and like maybe it doesn't hit, commercially. Like Molly House is going to probably sell less copies than Pax Pamir, and that's like completely fine. But I am so proud of like what Molly House is. Like not a single part of it was rushed. There are like maybe some things I would have done differently, but like I'm really happy with how that game sorted out. And because I'm doing games in the context of this community, it allows me to make sure that they will achieve that like minimum level of success that lets me jump to the next project.
It's nice to have that community of honest friends, I guess, and build a game that you would enjoy playing with the group of people that you most want to play with, in a sense, It sounds like.
And when you're doing design, the first time you make a game, it's really hard because you don't know how to make a game, right? So it's going to be difficult. And then as you get better at making a game, it suddenly starts to become very easy to finish games. It doesn't get any easier to make a great game. It gets a lot easier to make an okay game. And I think it's so easy in that context to just look at the design and be like, yeah, it's fine. Let's ship it. Let's be done. Let's move to the next project. I get it. It takes a lot of fatigue. I feel like the only thing that I really have as like a skill is just endurance. It's my only competitive advantage is I can sit and work on a project for a long time. I don't think I'm like any sharper or any better as a designer than anybody else who happens to have a published game, but I do think I just can stick with it.
You can suffer your own.
Yeah. Well, and also I want to
Yeah.
like, I always write like a little document that's like, this is what I want the game to achieve. And I can look at a game that works, but isn't achieving what I want it to achieve, and I can throw it away. It makes me a bad collaborator in a lot of ways. Like when I was very hesitant to work on Molly House with Joe, because I told Joe, like, you kind of don't want to work with me on a project because I'm miserable. In fact, like, thankfully, I mean, the process with Joe is really interesting. Actually, Dan Thoreau did a really excellent interview with Joe where he really got into the weeds of what it's like to work with me. And Joe was very honest about it. He said, like, look, the first half was great. And the second half, like, I got tired and kind of frustrated. And it was really hard to finish Molly House. Mm-hmm. And I agree. That was my response too. And I left that process thinking like, well, God, I don't really want to collaborate with anybody again. And it wasn't because Joe is wonderful. I mean, Joe is an unbelievable designer. They're going to they have a whole career ahead of them. But I find that like, I'm just a little bit too much and I need to like just own my own projects and work through them to protect people.
It's nice that you have that like self-awareness though. Because I feel like there are plenty of folks who can be difficult to work with who like are like, oh, I'm great to work with. So
yeah, that's what it's like recording this podcast.
On that note, it's been a delight, Cole. Really appreciate you coming on.
This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you for all the additional time. That's it, right? Tom, you want to walk us out here?
I think that's going to do it for this week's podcast. Thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. Hopefully you got something out of this. I know I did. Thank you to Bonehouse for letting us use your song Rot as our opening theme. Cole, is there anything you want to plug or shout out? This is your time to do it. Free time.
I will be at UKGE. So if you happen to be in the UK and you want to say hi, I will be in and around the show. We're doing a signing event for Molly House. And then if you miss me then, I will also be at Gen Con this year. Nothing new to report. I am finishing Oath. It will hopefully be done by the end of the summer, but these things take time.
Nice. If you're loving the cast, share with a friend or on Reddit or on BGG. If you do, let us know and we'll send you one of those juicy micro badges. Reach out to us directly at shelfstablecast@gmail.com. All this and more, including everything for Cole, will be in the show notes.
Okay, yeah, next week's topic is going to be dedicated communities and what they mean for, I guess, the game or the hobby. Something like that.
So vague.
Very good.
Thanks, everyone.
And with that, I'm off.
See you. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Cole.